If you're visiting South Korea and planning to head to cities outside of Seoul, such as Busan, Daegu, Jeonju, etc., there's a high chance you're going to be catching a KTX to get there. It is honestly one of the most efficient ways to travel across South Korea. However, if you've never taken one before, it can be a little bit intimidating. And that's why I thought I'll do this video here today, outlining everything you need to know from what to prepare and be aware of before your trip, how to book and more importantly reserve tickets, and also what you need to know whilst you're riding the KTX, and also everything else that you need to know on the day of your trip. My goal is for you to be equipped to take on the KTX like a seasoned pro by the end of this video, and so without a second further, let's get into it, shall we? And let's start by addressing the elephant in the room, which is that are there any other options to travel in between cities in Korea? The short answer is yes, but whether or not you want to consider one of these other options depends on what's important to you. Let's use KTX's most popular route, aka Seoul to Busan, as an example. There are other options such as the ITX, the Mugonghwa, and the express bus. If price point is what's important to you, then without a doubt the express bus is the option for you. As you can see here, the price of the express bus is literally less than half that of the KTX. But as with everything else in the world, there is going to be a trade-off, and in this instance it's going to be time, as the express bus option will take you over 4 hours to get to Busan if there's no traffic. The ITX or Mugonghwa will get you there around 4 to 5.5 hours respectively, whereas the KTX will get you to Busan in 2 hours or so, sometimes even less. This is why I personally think that KTX is the way to go for travelers like you and I, who are looking to do big routes like this and also looking to make the most of their trip, because at the end of the day you're basically paying to get hours of your trip back. There is also, by the way, the SRT, but I'm going to touch on that a little later in this video. And with that reasoning out of the way, let's now talk about how to book your KTX tickets, for there are several options. Let's first cover the most straightforward way, which would be to get the tickets on the day itself at the KTX station. Once you arrive, look for the KORAIL ticket office or KORAIL ticketing machine, which looks a little bit like this. The machines usually have an English option, making the process much easier. Once you've located the machine, the booking process itself is fairly straightforward, so I won't walk you through that. However, please be sure to select KTX as your train type. This part's important because the machine will also list out the other slower train options that we spoke about earlier. Obviously, they're going to be a little bit cheaper, but they're going to take you a little longer to get to your destination, so we don't want that. That being said, I would always recommend you pre-book or reserve your ticket prior to your departure date, especially if you're planning to travel during peak travel periods or traveling in a large group of people and want to be seated together. Not to mention that booking earlier also ensures you that you'll get the train slot time that you need that will fit into your itinerary. The most straightforward way, of course, will be to book this via the KORAIL website. Note that the tickets for your date of departure will open up 1 month beforehand, so I do recommend checking as early as you can so that you have more options. And yes, the site, as you can see, is available in English and also, in my opinion, fairly easy to navigate, so I wouldn't give you a step-by-step. However, there are several things that you need to be aware of when booking your ticket. First off, this travel type drop down here that shows you normal, East Center, VSAFG train. Just ignore all of that and choose normal. 2. The KORAIL website will also show you other transport options that we discussed earlier, so make sure you click here to view only KTX tickets for your desired date of departure. It is also worthwhile noting that while Seoul is the main departure station for KTXs, it is not the only one within Seoul. In fact, you can also catch the KTX departing from Yongsan, Cheongyangni, and Yeongdepo, which is important to know because the Seoul station can be quite far to get to depending on where you're staying in Seoul. For example, if you're staying in the Yongsan or Itaewon area, it may be more convenient and also less luggage dragging for you to catch the train from Yongsan station. And if you're staying in Dongdaemun, it will be easier for you to catch the KTX from the Cheongyangni station. And the easiest way to find this out would just simply be to plot the distance of your hotel/accommodation to 4 of these stations and find the closest station to you. Trust me, you're going to want to do it because it's going to make such a difference on the day of your travel. That being said, I actually use Klook to book all my KTX tickets, as I have some points with them that I needed to use up anyway. But personally, I also found the user interface to be a lot more user-friendly, because as you can see here, all I needed to enter was Seoul to Busan, and it plotted out all the KTX options, including the ones that departed from other stations that are within Seoul. Note that you'll actually have to pre-select them on the KORAIL website. Not only that, it also gave me other train station options that I can stop off with that are within Busan. That could actually be closer to my hotel. If you're a regular Klook user, you may wish to use my code, which is going to give you up to 5% off your bookings. If you're you're familiar with Trip instead, I actually use Trip to book all my flights and hotels. You may also choose to book your KTX tickets within the Trip app. All three options are going to get you on the same KTX train. It just depends on what you're familiar with. I'm going to put links to all three in my description box. And by the way, no matter which option you go with, you'll be asked to select between a standard or first class carriage ticket. And the key difference between the two is comfort, as the standard class carriage is in a 2x2 configuration, whereas the first class carriage is in a 2+1 configuration. Apart from that, the first class will also almost always be the quieter carriage, as there are going to be less people. That being said, I actually took the standard carriage during this trip from Seoul to Busan and then from Busan to back, and in both trips my carriage was very quiet anyway. What I will say, however, that did kind of sway my mind a little bit to maybe taking a first class ticket on my next long KTX ride was the leg space. You see, I was on a fairly full train from Seoul to Busan, and when all the seats are occupied, there are actually not a lot of leg space, and I'm only 5'7" and not a tall person. And so if you were traveling in a full carriage and also taller than me, I would recommend going for a first class carriage or try to score one of the seats that are in the front of the standard carriage. Also, if you're planning to take multiple KTX rides around Korea, it may be worthwhile considering a KORAIL Pass. What is KORAIL Pass, I hear you say? Don't worry, we're about to get into it. It is a pass that's made for foreign visitors that allows you to use the KORAIL operated trains across South Korea for a set number of travel days. And this, by the way, not only includes the KTX but also all the other options that we talked about, including the ITX and Mugonghwa. In short, instead of having to purchase separate KTX tickets for each individual journey, you can just purchase the KORAIL Pass once and use it throughout your trip. There are two main styles of KORAIL passes. One is the consecutive pass that allows you to take unlimited KTX rides for a fixed number of consecutive days, which makes a little less sense if you're planning to stay at each location for at least a couple of days, which is why, unsurprisingly, it tends to be the less popular option to the flexible pass. And this is actually the better option for most of us, where the KTX rides are actually spaced out for days in between. So for example, if you're doing Seoul to Busan and then Busan to Gyeongju to Seoul for a few days, then a flexible pass obviously makes more sense. But here's the important part. The KORAIL Pass may not be automatically cheaper. It is only worth it, obviously, if the cost of your separate KTX tickets would end up being higher than getting the pass itself. For example, if you're only planning to go to Busan during your Korea trip, I can tell you now it's not going to be worthwhile getting a KORAIL Pass, and it's going to be just cheaper and easier for you to get individual KTX tickets. Even though you're allowed to take a KTX train, you would need to go ahead and book a train's time slot and seat for your desired date of departure. So the rule of thumb is actually quite simple. If you're only planning 1 or 2 intercity trips during your Korea trip, then it's probably not worthwhile getting a KORAIL Pass. But if you're planning to travel across multiple Korean cities within one trip, definitely do the math before you book and get the KORAIL Pass instead. Hey guys, Editing Steve here, jumping in real quick to add in this part about the SRT, aka the other high-speed train alternative that you may want to consider. There are a few differences between the KRT and SRT. I'm going to outline them here so that it's going to help you decide which one to do. One, the KTX will depart from multiple stations in Seoul, whereas the SRT will only depart from Soseo, which is located on the Gangnam side, and so it can make it a little bit difficult to get to if you're staying on the northern part of Han River. But if you're staying in Gangnam, then you should definitely consider the SRT. Do note as well that the KTX does have the wider network, and so unless you're planning to travel to Busan and happen to be staying in the Gangnam area, then the SRT will be worthwhile considering. But if you're planning to do multiple cities around South Korea and not staying in the Gangnam area, then KTX will be the way superior choice. But I'm going to leave the booking link for the SRTs in my description box anyway, in case you do want to consider them. Now back to the original video we go. Right, you've purchased your KTX ticket and it's now your day of departure. Let's talk about everything you need to know on the day itself. The first thing I want to talk about is a hot topic, and that is the luggage. No matter which carriage class you decide to go with, travelers who are just carrying a backpack or maybe a little carry-on will be just fine with the overhead storage that's available on either carriages. However, if you're someone who's traveling with a lot of luggages, or maybe traveling in a group or with family and thus have a lot of luggage bags, I would recommend 2 things. One, getting to the platform earlier and getting to your carriage as soon as you can, as luggage rack spaces are limited. However, if you're in this situation or perhaps have some doubts about your luggage situation, like for example, maybe you might be traveling with a bicycle or musical instrument, it is always good to check with someone at the station prior to boarding. Major stations including Seoul, Busan, and Incheon will have a dedicated KORAIL travel center that looks a little like this, that's open from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. If they're however not open, then your next best option would be the KORAIL ticketing windows that are open from 5 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. And they will be able to answer basically any questions that you might have around this. But if for some reason they are also unable to answer your question, then there is also a tourist English speaking hotline number here that operates from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. The next thing that you'll need to know is how to interpret your ticket to make sure that you're at the right platform at the correct time and on the right train. And I speak from experience, as I, especially during my first trip to Korea, have in some instances been on the wrong KTX train. So let's get into it. So this is what a KTX train ticket looks like. And the 4 details that you need to check before you're boarding are the departure time, train number, carriage number, and seat number. Departure time is fairly straightforward, but make sure you get to the KTX station earlier before your departure time. I would recommend at least an hour beforehand to give yourself some time to locate the correct platform, as some of these main stations can actually be quite big. Don't treat the departure time like a casual suggestion. If your ticket says 10:30 departure time, it means you need to be at your platform 15 minutes prior to departure time, okay? Next, check your train number, and this is actually the singular most important piece of information on the train ticket, as there may be several KTXs heading to the same destination on the same day. So don't just look for Busan or Daegu on the departure board. Match the train number on your ticket with the train number on the station screen so that you can easily locate your platform, and even then, check the number of the train that's on the platform before boarding. Next up is carriage number, which tells you exactly which train car to board. On the platform, you'll usually see signs or markings that help you find where each carriage will stop. So if your ticket, for example, says carriage 8, you can of course jump on carriage 2, but then you'll have to lug your luggage all the way from 2 across to 8. But with the luggage, crowds, and normally narrow aisles, you're just gonna make your life a lot easier if you had just boarded carriage 8 in the first place. Next up is seat number, which is fairly straightforward, but this is where you'll find it on a ticket. I always recommend getting to the KTX station at least an hour to an hour and a half before your departure time, maybe even a little bit earlier if you're taking the KTX for the first time, to allocate some extra padding time in case you get lost. But the first thing you want to do once you get to the KTX station is to determine exactly where your departure platform is. But once you've located your platform, the next super important thing to do would be to locate a konbini store to get yourself some delicious snacks for your KTX journey. And there are plenty of delicious options at the stations. I love konbini food like the gimbaps, sandwiches, drinks, and I even have a special love for these Korean baked goods. But do note that I would generally advise against bringing any hot food or highly aromatic food on board. After all, you do have other passengers on the carriage to be considerate of. Speaking of considerate, when you're on board, always observe silence. If you're listening to music or watching a movie, make sure to be using your headphones. And if you need to take a call, head to the space in between the carriages where the toilets and the luggage racks are located. Always remember that we are just foreigners exploring someone else's country, and so be respectful. Apart from that, sit back, relax, because you have just successfully boarded your first ever KTX train ride. If you're heading to Busan or maybe to some other cities outside of Seoul, you'll be glad to know I'll be uploading some travel guides for some of those cities starting from next week. But I really wanted to get this KTX video out of the way first, as I feel that you'll need to know this beforehand. But also, if you're interested in a what to do in Seoul, you'll be glad to know that I've just uploaded a 3-day first-timer itinerary for Seoul. I'm gonna link that video at the end of this video so that you can go ahead and watch that. If you're heading to South Korea for the first time, you're going to want to watch my first timer checklist detailing everything you need to know before and within the first hour of arriving in South Korea. You're also going to find that video at the end of this video. I do hope that you found value in today's video, and if you have, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, all the good stuff that you know are going to appease those YouTube algorithm gods, but way more importantly are just going to make my day as a content creator. Comment and feedback if you have any for me, as I do love hearing from the people who take time to watch my videos. And by the way, if you have 50 points to Gryffindor for you, I hope that you have a fantastic day ahead, or that you've already had a good day. I'm gonna see you real soon in the next video. Tumanayo!